IEBC inaleta mabadiliko na mbinu mpya za uchaguzi yenye wadhifa wa mipaka. Chagua Kenya unayoitaka, usirudie yale makosa.
Hi James.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you.
How do you do today?
Jerry Boring.
And those circumstances. And a warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Well, let's get straight into it.
Right.
The IEBC has already set the election date for the 14th of March 2012. What made you choose that date? What are the statutory mandates behind your decision? And is your decision cast in stone? Will we see it changing at some point?
First, the election dates in any democracy are set, and they are set in advance.
Indeed.
The American Constitution sets the election date, and it is known years in advance. Our own Constitution that we adopted on 27th of August set the election date at some point.
Absolutely.
The issue is the election date in the transitional period. The first election after the Constitution was promulgated on the 27th of August last year. Nobody knew before the Electoral Commission announced that date when that election date must be.
Yes.
But you cannot hurtle along in a democracy without having certainty as to the date when the elections will be held.
Indeed. It creates a lot of tension.
There has to be an election date. So whether this election date is acceptable, not acceptable, well thought or not well thought, cast in stone or not cast in stone, we have to move from the premise that there is a need in a democracy to have an election date that is well known in advance. And I'll give you some of the considerations that drove to the picking up of this particular date. We have an Elections Act, and we have a Political Parties Act. These are new legislation which were introduced recently in order to transform the political landscape. And this need for transforming the legal landscape is a response to what happened in 2007.
Yes.
In other words, this is Kenyan society's own response to what happened, so that we go to election in a much more better environment than we did before.
Yes.
The Elections Act provides certain things that must be done, precedent to the election, things that have to be done before the election is done. I'll give you a few. One, that civil servants who are aspiring to be candidates in the election must resign, I think, 8 months before.
Yes.
So you start counting from the election date, and 8 months thereafter, they resign. That Harambes there's a restriction or prohibition on Harambes. Also, 7 months from the date of the election. In addition, it also provides for parties to nominate candidates for 5 days before the election date, to have their party nomination rules 6 months before the election date, and so on and so forth.
Well, at some point, your commission had said that they were okay with the December date. What changed?
You see, the August date and the December date and the current date were set because of different things. You remember when the commission was talking about the December date, we had not had the court ruling, the constitutional court ruling.
Yes, yes.
And the debate whether December is more preferable than August was raging as this court was taking place in the High Court. Now, the ruling itself made it very clear that the election date will be determined pending two things happen.
Yes.
And you know those things. One, either dissolution of
by the principals,
coalition of the principals deciding in writing. The principals had not made a decision in writing at that particular time.
Yes.
And the coalition government was still running ahead.
For the comfort of the viewer,
right?
What if the principals now come and say that they are ready to, to call it a day and put it in writing and say we are ready for December? How does that affect your work?
I don't want to speak for the principals or to anticipate the principals.
On the assumption that they do that.
But when the principals do, and they tell us that we are now ready for this election, and I'm praying that they don't tell us the election should be done in December, in November. I'm hoping they'll be able to say this well in advance.
And you need to be ready for that.
Yeah, so if they say so now, we will be ready to run the election, if they give us sufficient time.
Yes.
So even this element that the principals have to decide there has to be a lot of rationality in when they make that decision. Because if they want this election to be held in December, whatever date in December,
yes,
one would expect the electoral management body to be given sufficient time, because there is a whole slew of administrative matters to be done. What I mentioned to you were purely legislative issues.
Yes,
but
yes.
there are so many administrative things that we have to do
Without
in
a doubt.
order to
Yes.
be capable, or in order to be fully prepared for an election, number one. Number two, you don't want to go to this particular election in a hurry. We have to get things done.
The members of the public, the citizenry, have a lot of questions about your office, your commission, and let's listen to some of those, and then you can respond and give some insight into that.
Right.
Inaleta mabadiliko.
Mimi ningependa kuuliza kazi ya IEBC ni kazi gani?
Watuelezee ile criteria walitumia kudivide hizo ama kupata hizo new constituencies, kila mtu ili aelewe.
Sasa nauliza, sasa hiyo uchaguzi itakuwa haki na ukweli? Manake sasa tukipiga kula tunataka tujue sasa kama hiyo polling station tumepigia kula, tujue nani ameshinda hapo. Tunataka tujue sasa ni mpango gani wameweka, kusiwe na vita kama ile tulishuhudia.
The mandate of the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission is, one, basically to run elections and referenda. Secondly, to do boundaries delimitation. Boundaries delimitation was previously done by the Interim Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, and you are aware the Kriegler Commission had recommended that boundaries delimitation and the business of elections should be done by two separate entities.
Yes.
And that is what happens elsewhere in the world. But the framers of our constitution chose to fuse all those functions into one. So boundary delimitation is also part of our responsibilities.
Okay.
The other responsibilities of the commission set in the constitution includes registration, periodic registration or continuous registration of voters, voter education, updating of the voter register, because this has to be done from time to time, running by elections, and as I said, running the election themselves. And all the other activities that have to do with the elections, including also promoting the culture of democracy.
Well, you talked about voter registration. When are you going to start doing that?
The voter registration can only start once a number of things have happened. One, once the delimitation process is complete, once you finish the delimitation process, which means now you know generally the boundaries of constituencies and wards, then you do the mapping of polling stations. And you do the mapping of polling stations in two ways. One is the general mapping of polling stations, where you know generally where they stand in the constituency, but you're also mapping the geography of the neighboring area. It's a complete...
Has that happened? Is that going on, or where are we?
That can only go on when we finish the delimitation process. So once the delimitation process is complete, you start the voter registration, which goes on for a number of 30, 40 days, depending on so many other things. Once you complete the voter registration, you also provide for the inspection of the voter register and the compilation of the voter register.
Working March 14th backwards, when do we expect to start the voter registration?
We'll start the voter registration, not necessarily working from March 14th backwards, but working from in our strategic plan. Our strategic projection, if it is not hampered by the voter delimitation process. You're aware that after the registration, after the gazettement of the date, citizens have a window to go to court, and the court must make a determination in about 3 months. Now, if you're reading the Constitution, and 30 days if you're reading the statute.
Okay.
But there's that period of settling those, adjudicating those differences.
Yes.
After that is done, then the process of voter mapping the stations and the polling stations will start. There will not be polling stations at that particular time. There will be registration centers.
Yes,
But
yes.
these registration centers will be transformed into voting
into
station when the actual process starts. The Commission is doing a number of things. First is voter education. Now, you see, there is voter education, there is civic education, there is public education, and all those things. And those mean different things, and they have addressed different core areas. So the Commission now is undertaking, under one rubric of voter education, you are undertaking all those things. While the Commission also has partnered with certain international agencies, like a UK organization called ARIS and other local organizations. And these are organizations that train in conflict mitigation, how to identify early signs of conflict, how to mitigate those, and how to deal with them. And under the general headline of voter education, our program stretches beyond the date of the counting.
Yeah.
It will not end on the day the election ends.
Yes.
We want it to transcend the election. So 3-4 months after the election results are known, we will be still at it, meaning talking to Kenyans in order to accept the results of the election.
Yes, yes. Do you, for instance, have prosecutorial powers?
The Act gives the Commission the powers to prosecute. In order for us to prosecute, the Commission is engaging actively with the Attorney General in order for us to have a second to us, seasoned prosecutors. And we are also looking for investigators who will also be seconded to us from the Director of CID. We would then train them in electoral matters, and during the elections then, or during those particular periods, we can now use these people to prosecute and also to investigate. As things stand now, the Commission has got homegrown lawyers, our own internal lawyers, and they can prosecute cases. But we don't have a well-developed prosecutorial capacity and an investigatory mechanism. So what we want, and we have initiated consultations with the Attorney General and also the Director of Public Prosecutions, and we'll be pursuing this collaboration very actively to ensure that we have the capacity to prosecute and also the capacity to investigate. This means that the Commission will very soon be in a position to decide when to take a case and not be dependent on anybody else.
So you're able to take action against an electoral offense and see it all the way to the end, to get justice for the people who are offended?
Not now, but very, very soon.
Yes.
Very, very, very soon.
By the time we go to the polls. Yes.
Long, long, long before we go to the polls.
Yes.
Long, long. In a month or two, we should be able to have that capacity, have people in-house who will train ourselves. And there's a lot that we need these people to work on. One, hate speech. Second, although that's done by somebody else.
Yes.
But we'd also be interested in that. We'd also be interested in bribery and corruption. We'd also be interested in people fostering violence, whether that is verbal or in a different form.
Yeah.
You cannot be so subtle that the Commission cannot discover what you're doing.
Yes. What does one need to do or to have in order to be eligible to be a voter in the next coming elections?
One has to be a citizen of the Republic of Kenya. You must have an identity card or a passport. So if you're a citizen and you have an identity card and you have a passport, which means you are above 18, generally that qualifies you, by and large, to register and to become a voter.
We have had that you want to do away with the voter's card. Would you be able just to vote with your ID?
The law was recently amended so that one cannot be turned away from a polling station merely because you don't have a voter's card.
Yes.
So it will require you to come with the document you use to register. That is very important.
The document
if you use the ID card to register, then we would expect you to bring the ID card to vote. If you use the passport, we would expect you to bring the passport to vote. But the Commission will issue, by way of going outside the law, because the law provides for only those two instruments. But in order to go outside the law and to facilitate Kenyans and to motivate people to see value in the exercise of registration and voting, the Commission will provide some token of documentation. So when we register voters, they will not go empty-handed. We will provide them with some document. And that document can serve the purpose that previously was served by the voter's card. Right.
Let's take a short break. You're watching Countdown with the IEBC. Today, our guest, CEO of the Commission, James Oswago, and we'll be back shortly. IEBC. IEBC. Welcome back to Countdown with the IEBC. Our guest this afternoon, Mr. James Oswago, CEO and Secretary of the Commission. James, still lots of questions that the members of the public have, and maybe let's have a look at one or two of those, and then we can take it.
I would like to ask how many positions are there to be vied for in that the Constitution provide for?
I have two questions that I need addressed by IEBC. One, when will they start the civic education? Because majority of Kenyans are very ignorant about the voting process. And my second question is whether that voting process will be done within 1 day.
Yes, thank you. Justice Otieno asks how many positions, and the answer is that there are 6 positions. And this is a new creation by the Constitution. And this dovetails with the question by Evans Nganga, who wants to know when civic education will start and the voting process, and whether all this will be done in 1 day. The two questions are in a sense
Are intertwined.
Related.
Yes.
So you can answer them in one lump sum.
Yes.
So first, there are 6 positions, and that is a constitutional provision.
Yes.
Secondly, the voting will be done in 1 day for all the 6 positions. When this is not the Commission's creation, this is the law.
This isn't the Constitution.
So the Constitution provides that you have 6 positions to be voted for separately. You have some at the county level, you have some at the constituency level, and then you have the presidential at the national level. So you have the presidential at the national level, you have the governor, you have the senator, you have the women's representative and the youth leader representative, both at the county level. And they are all done in the same day. Mm-hmm. The Constitution provides that the results could be announced within a period of 7 days. But the Commission intends to release these results, all of them, as soon as is practically possible.
Indeed.
The Commission may decide to accelerate or prioritize the release of results depending on the choice. It might decide to release all the results together, or it might decide, for instance, to give greater prominence to presidents, say to the presidential election results.
Yes.
But these are decisions that the Commission is weighing with, considering all the options and also the logistics, because most of these things result on so many things. One is the initial electronic transmission of votes, and secondly, our law requires that although the results could have been transmitted electronically, those are provisional results. They are non-official.
Yes.
They only become official when the document travels from the polling station in one form or the other up to the National Tallying Center for the presidential election.
Okay. You talked about logistics, and a couple of weeks back you did a mock election. You held a mock election in 2 parts of the country. Did that prove to you that you will be able to have an election of 6 officers on the same day successfully?
The reason you do a mock election, and the idea of a mock election, I think we are pioneering this in Africa. I'm not aware of any other place in this continent where a mock election has been done, either on a smaller scale or a larger scale than we did. But the idea and the concept of a mock election is to replicate as much as possible the conditions of the actual election. You carefully select the criteria which you want to test. Some of those criteria are internal. Some of those are of benefit to the wider public. Mm-hmm. But what we did, we had observers and others. The result is that we found some very unique, very interesting things. For instance, where we tested 6 ballots, we found that although the ballots are clearly marked, and the ballot papers clearly marked, and the ballot boxes is clearly marked, you found that people still slotted the ballot papers in the wrong box. For instance, you had a ballot box dedicated to the presidency.
Yes.
And an individual signs for it, completes the presidential election ballot paper. Now, instead of proceeding to slot this in the presidential ballot box, you would find this somehow in the governor's ballot box. So,
and they clearly marked?
They are clearly marked. The ballot boxes are clearly marked. The ballot papers are clearly marked.
What is the problem?
Partly people would say it is a function of maybe better voter education. But it is not just better voter education, because the Commission recently conducted an election for the Law Society of Kenya.
Yes.
And last year we conducted an election for the Football Federation of Kenya. In the LSK election, and in terms of intellectual sophistication, they don't get better than lawyers. And we found that there was spoiled ballot papers.
There's an assumption that
That
we
is
all...
in the LSK. This is not just any other.
There's an assumption that we're all clever.
Well, that is an assumption that can be is rebuttable.
It's rebuttable, yes.
A spoiled ballot paper simply means that it is not. It doesn't convey a specific intention.
Yes.
Now, so we have to deal with that. Find out how do you deal with that situation. This is one thing that came up in the we picked up in the mock poll. The other issue that came up in the mock poll was in the ballot paper you have different candidates and they have different signs. And you also found that people are marking these things differently. You know, so at the end of the day, you find a ballot paper that normally should not be spoiled is spoiled because there are multiple markings which should not be there.
James, which brings me back to my question. Is it possible then to do this election in one day? It's not
a question whether it is possible. The election shall be done in one day. That is the law. That is what the Constitution provides. The assurance that the Commission is giving the country, and this is the reason why we are doing these mock polls. And I've told you, I'm not aware of any mock poll anywhere else in Africa, in recent memory. The reason why we did this mock poll, and perhaps the reason why we might do another miniature one, is just to ensure that we got it 100% right. So the point that I'm saying is, we will do whatever it takes. If it is civic education, we'll do civic education. If it is wider dispersal of ballot boxes to ensure that you are in one room with one ballot box and you can't make a mistake, we will do that. But if you segregate the ballot boxes, you may achieve that certainty that every ballot paper is deposited in the right ballot box.
In the right place.
But you run into another problem.
Time.
The time and the wider management of the polling station. But whichever the case, ours is to ensure that the voter exercises the choice correctly. Right. And I'm sure that can be done.
Which could mean that the polling station could be open up to midnight.
No. The polling station will not be open up to midnight. The polling station will still be open within the meantime. But you can have more polling booths.
Okay.
You may have more streams.
Yes.
You have streams within a polling station. In the referendum, each stream was 750 voters, meaning if you went to a polling station and your name, the initial to your name, you'd find yourself in one stream. And 750 were given us a particular stream. Now, we are going to give maybe 350, and if the need be, perhaps even shorter streams to ensure that those who turn up, one, vote within the allocated time, number one. Two, are conveniently facilitated. Thirdly, and most importantly, that they are afforded the opportunity to correctly exercise that choice that they want to exercise.
Well, it's good to hear that you're putting in the mechanisms, and definitely not an easy task for you, but glad to hear that you're working it out.
Right.
Now, I earlier on asked you about the decision to choose March 14th as an election date. And I just want to go back to that and tie it with another question and say, who gave you the mandate to choose that particular date? And do you consider yourself really independent?
The independence of the Commission, as a Chapter 15 creation, is enshrined in the Constitution. It is also entrenched in the Act of Law, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. And we are not the only independent constitutional commission. All constitutional commissions are established for a purpose to support constitutional democracy. This is an innovation that has been there for some time in constitutional development.
James, where independence means what?
An independent commission is such that the Constitution creates independent commissions. you are given an area of activity by the Constitution. And that particular activity, that particular mandate is so significant that it supports the very idea of constitutional democracy. And there are several institutions that are parcelled those separate responsibilities.
Yes.
Ourselves, Judicial Service Commission, the police, and all the others. Each one of these will support some key activity of the state or of the nation. And you are given absolute autonomy in your own area. So we are an independent constitution, given the statute and also by the commission. Now, do we have a right to pick an election date? Nowhere in the world do election commission pick dates for elections. But in this country, there was a recent judicial pronouncement.
Yes.
And the court stated that if one of two things happened, then the electoral commission was the body mandated to pick and decide on the election date. And I think it is important that we get this right.
Yes.
The commission did not go shopping for additional responsibilities. This was hoisted on us by the court.
By the Constitutional Court, yeah.
And that judgment, as of now, is the law.
Is the law. You see, it's important that I ask that question because we get the impression that the politicians are the ones who set the date. Perhaps because they make more noise than you do. And that's the reason why I was asking the question, to be able to clarify that. What is the role of the voter in all this? You know, we are bashing you and asking you, what are you doing? Are you ready? Will you give us a credible election? But coming back and saying, what is our role as a voters? So
a voter has got an onerous responsibility. One, to criticize the commission, to demand from us explanations. Number two, the voter also has a responsibility, that a burden that they have to discharge, and that is to exercise that discretion correctly. Thirdly, the voters have a power which they seldom realize. We had a very poor election, and we had what we have described elsewhere as a minor disagreement.
Yes.
It wasn't minor because we lost lives.
Yes.
The Kenyan voter can preempt that by simply standing firm, by constantly recalling what went on wrong in 2007 and saying, never again. It is up to the voter to say, we don't want to go through that again.
Yes.
And then to correctly read the signs that tend to lead you to the repeat of those things. The Electoral Commission alone cannot guarantee all those.
Indeed.
It requires a combination of several other things for a country to have a fair and credible election. For example, you need political players to be responsible. Those who want to contest those elections must understand they have a responsibility to themselves, to the commission, and to the country as well. There is the civil society. Those who don't want to contest elections, those who are not in the electoral management body, but those who just want to ensure that the nation, that the peace and tranquility is sustained. You can't sit in your own household and fold your arms and say things will get better. We have to go outside to make sure that the electoral environment is such that free and fair elections can be conducted. Bribery is not there, not just by the Electoral Commission, by anybody else.
We are all supposed to be involved. I need to bring this
Yes.
to a close. Well, indeed, as you've had, the IEBC is willing and ready to be interrogated by you, and we're going to have this show every Sunday here on Citizen TV, every afternoon from 2 p.m. And you can see we're scrolling our contacts at the bottom of your screens on our Twitter account and our Facebook account, and you can also reach us on our email address, info@iebc.or.ke. I repeat, info@iebc.or.ke. Please feel free to shoot us your questions and your queries on the electoral process, and we will be sure to answer them on this program every Sunday afternoon for the next couple of weeks. Our guest this evening, James Oswago. Thank you, James, for shedding light.
Thank you.
And I believe the viewers will be